Do you have any idea what this is doing to my credibility right now?
Mr. Rowan, all due respect, but you're involved in boxing. I don't think your credibility is in any jeopardy.
Okay, fair enough. I understand your perception. The government shares it. That's why they want a boxing czar.
Some of you not gonna like me.
It's funny, and I'm going to mention the fighter, and it's Deontay Wilder, how some of you defend this guy asking for more than his market value than he's ever been paid. That you're defending his decision that he should get for a Joshua fight when his highest purse is $2 million. And you defend him with every fiber of your YouTube channel. But Curtis Harper walks out of the ring because he doesn't feel it's worth getting belted out in a couple of rounds or maybe a couple of seconds by this awfully frightening Nigerian giant. That's strange. Curtis felt he wasn't getting paid enough. That's what you felt. Like how you feel Wilder is right because he's not getting paid enough. You questioned, well, Curtis, you don't bring more value, you're just a journeyman. Well, Deontay Wilder is an underachiever compared to Anthony Joshua. He doesn't bring the same value to the fight that Anthony Joshua does. But you don't see that. You don't see that. And yes, I said it in my assessment of the situation. It is your job. Yes. But I bet you there's a few journeymen in all weight classes who probably took a fight at short notice, like perhaps Curtis did, the sacrificial lamb. Probably went in there, got their eardrum busted out, or beaten up so badly that they've still got residual damage from that fight. Who wish, you know something, I wish I did that. Because the couple of thousand or whatever they paid me just wasn't worth it. Curtis is just a reflection of a number of boxers at different levels today who don't think they're getting paid enough, like Wilder, like Andrade was talking about the other year, like Broner when he turned down the Eddie Hearn deal. So what, because he's a journeyman, he just has to accept it? Yes, Ajagba missed out on a night's work. The crowd missed out on a fight. Yes, they did. But Curtis paid as well. He didn't get paid. You think he took that decision lightly? He's likely to get blackballed from boxing. You think he hasn't seen some of Ajagba's knockouts before? And that played into his mind? Things change. Things don't stay the same. If you'd done this when the mob, and not just the mob, don't just put it down to the mob, when fight promoters and managers and boxing clubs and commissions were a little more ruthless, what do you think would have happened to Curtis when he left that arena? Do you think he would have got away with that? Well, thankfully, as much as I disapprove of what Curtis did, thankfully, it's not as gangster today as it was then. People don't just accept things these days. They don't. The average civilian questions a lot more things these days. The average boxer questions his risk-reward situation much more. And if the elite boxers do it all the time, it was just a matter of time until a journeyman like Curtis did the same thing. Cut Curtis a break. He didn't get a paycheck. You missed out on a fight. Go home, put YouTube on. I'm sure you can find some fights that you can view to make up for that KO you knew that was inevitably going to manifest itself. Now, I'm not saying that the process is not necessary, especially in the heavyweight division. This really tells me when you've got 6'5", 6 guys with a, what is it, 88-inch reach. The guy looks like an absolute menace, yeah? You're 6'2", 6'1", 6 foot, nowhere near in the condition that this guy is. We know the process, yeah? The journeymen are fed like sacrificial lambs in the heavyweight division. To develop a prospect like Effe Ajagba, we just think it's a given that the journeymen are just going to show up to get their head taken off. And for the most part it is, because everybody needs a buck. But Friday, that given wasn't given. And it's a good reflection point. It's a good time of reflection. Yeah? Yeah, I know. He's an adult. He signed his contract. He should take his beating. Yes, we all know that. We understand that. But it's a good time for a lot of them heavyweights to perhaps reflect on their lives and say, well, is this worth it? Am I getting paid enough? Am I a mug for taking this deal? Because, yes, okay, it's a necessary process. Or is it a necessary process? Because let's think about someone like Effe Ajagba. Before he turned pro, he could have been fighting semi-pro in a World Series of Boxing, where he's fighting competition the same level that he's at for 5 rounds. But when he turns pro, the opposition goes right down to the bottom of the pecking order. Why is that? Because it's a given. Like I say, things change. It's 2018. Somebody's looking at the boxing ring from a different angle. This happens in life. Things just don't repeat themselves for the most part. Some people want to change the landscape and change how we previously did it traditionally. Curtis Harper, in my opinion, might not be the greatest representation of pugilism. No. I agree. He denied us a highlight reel knockout on some real shit. You did, Curtis. For us who want to watch them savage KOs, no. No benefit to us. But long term, for a lot of boxers, he may have turned a corner for a lot of boxers. They speak about unions. Who needs a union more than these journeymen? You know? Like a guy like Iran Barkley, a talented fighter, former freeweight champion, who's fallen on hard times at times, he may get benefit dinners. And some of the old pros and some of the old boxing dignitaries may help him out. What about the journeymen who get, like, there's no benefits for them. There's nothing. I don't know. I don't give a fuck about it. I just want to see the knockout. Fuck it. He can go suck dick and get money. Yeah, I know. Because we're all tough guys. I get it. But maybe you don't want to suck dick. Maybe you want some respect. You know, like protest has to be extreme. Protest has to be extreme. If he had just said in his dressing room, I ain't coming out to fight, it wouldn't have the visual impact of walking right up to the ring, right up to Ajagba, touching gloves, then walking straight out the ring, up the ramp. Viral video. Because let's say he just stayed in his dressing room and told his coach, tell him to call it off, man. I'm sick, man. I'm sick. There's nothing no one could say. The crowd would be disappointed. The promoter would be disappointed. But the man's sick. And that would be that. And no one would know, none the wiser. But this guy wanted to make a protest to the world about what he feels is his predicament. No matter how misled me or you think that is. And he succeeded. Maybe it needs someone to look into the world of boxing at the journeyman end of the scale. Are they being used? Are they being abused? And don't answer, yeah, they signed up for it. We know that. Stop repeating that. We know that. I know that. Everyone knows that. But if there's abuse there, it has to be looked into and investigated. In a way, it's the best thing that's happened to Ajagba. Because like Del Boy was saying, this story is going to get a lot of press. And it has. And you know something? Before this fight here, I always recognize Ajagba when he fights. Because he's quite distinctive. Dark-skinned brother. Great physique. His hairstyle's quite distinctive. But I never carried the name around in my head. Even after I've seen him fight. Now, I don't forget his name now. Effe Ajagba. Effe Ajagba. Yeah, I know you now. When I went to Curtis Harper's box rec, I saw Chris Arreola. So I know this brother. And the first thing that clicked in my head, he was semi-robbed. He won that fight. And for all I know, he could have trained really hard for that fight. And although he's never going to be top elite, he might have had a semblance of ambition at the time. But what did that ambition do for him? He lost to the more popular fighter, to the house fighter, to the PBC fighter. As you're supposed to. You know what I said? As you're supposed to. That's like, I believe it's a given. That's because I'm so used to seeing it. So what? Does that make it right? Doesn't no one have to investigate if certain fighters are up against a rigged deck when they step in the ring? If the fight goes the distance, doesn't that have to be investigated? You think he hasn't shared hard luck stories with pros in similar positions? You think he hasn't been around dressing rooms and fight scenarios and looked in the eyes of guys in similar positions to him who knew, yeah, I'm going to get knocked the fuck out tonight, bruh, for peanuts? And who knows? Maybe he just didn't do it for himself. Maybe he did it for all of them fighters he's seen in similar predicaments. Like I said, we take it for a given that this is the process for the average heavyweight like Effe. Okay, first 15 guys are going to be journeymen. You're going to be able to blast away easily. And we're going to be able to boost your profile so you can earn $1 million purses. And we can fatten our bank accounts too. But like I said, when he fights as an amateur, Effe, and he fights in the World Series of Boxing, his competition level is way fucking harder than it is for the first 16 or 15 or 17 fights as a pro. Way harder. The process is necessary to make somebody's pockets fat, right? Let's not bullshit about. I know boxing. He ain't learning nothing knocking over Curtis Harper. They're bringing better sparring partners than Curtis Harper. Learning nothing. This is to make him look like a beast. Simple as that. It's marketing. Oh, it's the education process. No, fuck off. Fuck you, you lying piece of shit. The facts are, they could redesign and restructure pro boxing where Effe is fighting someone the same level as him in his 6th or 5th, 4th or debut fight. Why not? If they do that in the amateurs in the World Series of Boxing, why not? Why not? Because a lot of guys, not necessarily Effe, but maybe Effe, would be getting exposed after 2, 3, 4, 5 fights. Yes. You want to build your prospect up for a couple of years so you can get a fat contract from the network, sponsorship, endorsement, blah, 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 blah. We know the game. We know the game. Like I said, the journeyman of yesteryear wouldn't have did that. You know, the way society was structured in America or Britain or in a lot of westernized settings in the 50s or 60s, you know, you didn't have all these career options. You're dealing with times where the average kid on your block wasn't going to university. Nobody in your area was going to university. Well, you don't even know affluent area. Nobody's going. Nobody's going. But these days, they encourage all kids, not necessarily to go to uni, but the possibility is there for you. The options are there if you want to go. People accepted their roles. If you grew up doing an apprenticeship as a butcher, that was your job for life in a lot of regions of the world. Or a shoemaker, or a builder, or a milkman. You were the milkman. People accepted their roles. And this may be rose-coloured spectacles, but I think the job market in years gone was a lot more stable. People question things now. They have higher expectations. They have more spending power than ever. They have so much access to technology. Of course you think you're something special. Now in the long run, in a capitalistic paradigm, too many people questioning the chiefs is going to slow up the cogs on the wheel. So I don't know how sustainable that is. But that's where we are. That's where we are. If 15 mil is crackhead money, and a couple of grand to get hit by someone who maybe hits just as hard as that guy who called it crackhead money, is something a boxer might want to question and think about hard before he gets in the ring. Curtis walked all the way up. I don't know, maybe it was last minute. He just said, what the fuck am I doing? So I'm not expecting a mass revolution of journeymen saying, no, I'm not taking them risks for the money you're giving me. But, you know, gradually we could see a change where, you know, they're going to have to pay these guys danger money. You want to build up your prospect with this highlight reel, this KO highlight reel, and use me as cannon fodder in the process. Well, you know what I mean? We have to talk a little further about the purse. I ain't going in there. The journeyman, his role has to be considered. Because if he says to himself, let's say a middle of the road, low income promoter If he can't use journeyman, his shows are literally finished. If the journeyman says, well, what you're paying me for to fight this prospect is ridiculous. And plus, I've got to try and avoid the 28-day suspension so I can fight again. This is what I do. And is it worth all the damage I'm going to pick up for what you're paying me? Then the low-income promoter is left with the prospect of saying, well, what do I do now? Do I put my prospect in with another prospect? What's the consequences of that? You're going to have to pay that prospect way more than you're paying the journeyman. And he may beat your prospect before you've had any chance of developing him. That's a no-go. That's a no-go. Then his other option is, okay, I can't put 2 prospects in the ring. Let's match 2 journeymen in the ring. I mean, he can afford to pay him, but who wants to see it? How much tickets can they sell? Then if we go upscale to the upmarket promoter, well, without journeyman, like I said, they could reformat boxing like a World Series of boxing, but just pro level, without journeyman. But the facts are, at that level there, they're always going to get people who are willing to get in the ring and take a few thousand and chance their luck to try and beat Effe Ajagba or whoever it is, Hergovich or Joe Joyce. They're always going to get mugs. I'm going to use that word for now. Mugs to go in there and do that. They can afford to pay the journeyman at least something, a little more than a low-income promoter. But even then, we saw Friday, Curtis Harper said, no, not going there. Not going there. You got to look at pro boxing, compare it to the other models, amateur, World Series of boxing. The truth is, amateur boxing, for the most part, is always competitive. Even from your debut, your first, second, third of fights, they'll match you with someone with a similar experience level to you. Then you'll get to the ABAs, Golden Gloves, Olympics, and you're always matched with the best from the rival countries. And that's how that works. World Series of Boxing, same thing. But let's face it. Look at Tyson Fury's last 2 fights. No disrespect, Deontay Wilder. Look at some of his title defenses. Look at his first 38 opponents. You know, Ajagba versus Harper, what didn't happen? What about Joe Joyce versus that tall American guy? Donnie Palmer, I believe his name was. And then he fought a European before that. I haven't done the research, but there's a percentage, a high percentage of professional boxing that has nothing to do with competitiveness or competition. A high percentage. And that's the truth. That's the absolute truth and facts. And it's been like that since the Earl of Queensberry laid down the blueprint, my brother. Yes. And maybe that needs to be looked at. Maybe it needs to be looked at. Let's stick with the heavyweight division. The heavyweight prospect, let's say first 15 or 16 fights over 2 years or 2.5 years or whatever. Knocking over these journeymen. In that time, he's building endorsements, sponsorships. The highlight reel knockout videos he has makes him look way more awesome than he actually is. Because we're all saying Ajagba's a beast. Ajagba hasn't fought nobody with a jab or a chin. And he's not likely to for a good few fights. Is that competitive sport? At least with the white-collar amateur boxing with Logan Paul and KSI, they actually wanted to fight each other and beat each other up. So it was a tough fight in the end. They announced the fight and they both had an equal amount of time to prepare, which the journeyman often doesn't. Boxing is often supplementing a second income for them. They can't train as much. Imagine I go to Old Trafford, Man United versus Spurs. And before the game, they announce on the speakers, yeah, Spurs haven't had access to their training facilities for a couple of months. The players are now having to take second jobs because of cutbacks. But enjoy the game. It'd be crazy. It'd be absolutely crazy. There's not much sports to do that. I mean, even in UFC, they've signed a roster of all different fighters at different weight classes. But do you get the journeyman thing? Well, I know Ronda Rousey was fed a lot of soft touches, so I'm not sure. But I'm told it's more evenly matched fights than boxing. That's what I've been told. That might be all bullshit, you know. But there's not many sports where you see that. Someone is way better than their opponent, facing off on national television. It's not like it's hidden out of our periphery. Nah, this is national television, PBC, Fox, Spike, NBC, and whatever. Matchroom, Box Nation, Channel 5. Dave. Non-competitive mismatches, week after week after week after week. Month after month, year after year after year. And then to make it worse, when the fighters get to championship level, we get all types of roadblocks from getting the fights that should happen. Hold on, didn't you get enough soft touches in the first 15 or 16 fights of your career that you're complaining that, you know what I mean, you don't want to fight because of this reason and that reason? What the fuck? I'm saying 15 or 16. Anthony Yards had about 17. And believe it or not, just for the sake of the UK-US argument, there was channels actually saying Frank Warren was doing a good job. So hold on. Anthony Joshua is the biggest coward in boxing, and he was fighting for a title in his 17th fight or whatever it was. But what Frank Warren's doing with Anthony Yard is acceptable. You're just smoking too much shit at this point here to even have any argument with equilibrium with you. Ridiculous. As far as I know, they don't have matchmakers in the amateurs or the World Series of Boxing. But no, listen, from when I started watching boxing, Mickey Duff used to hire Johnny Boss. Johnny Boss. His nickname was the Grave Nigger. I have to keep repeating that. The Grave Nigger. Because he's literally digging up bodies for these promoters to fill out their cards for the likes of Frank Bruno and Gary Mason and Horace Notice, the three Terry Lawless fighters in his stable, who Mickey Duff used to promote, and Jarvis Astaire and Mike Barrett. Them good old days there. Pro boxing.
That's a good punch, and that looks to me as though we may not see any more of Chuck Gardner of Minneapolis tonight. One punch, that's all it took, and he's out, and good enough. The man took 30 hours to get here. He arrived exhausted on Thursday night at a nightmare journey. He clearly is underfit, and it only took one not terribly lethal looking punch from Bruno to put him away, and he's still stricken. And so all the suggestions that this was not a good match, I'm afraid, have been proved right. The man had no chance. He shouldn't have been in the ring. And Bruno won't be too proud of that victory. In fact, he looks concerned. That's a victory that has done him no good at all. Terry Lawless wants him to have as much fighting as possible, but you don't want fights like that. It's done Bruno no good, and it's certainly done Chuck Gardner no good, and it's a relief to see that he's regained consciousness.
You're going to be all right, pal.
Even though he's still down. Well, somebody's saying you're going to be all right, pal, but I don't know whether he'd agree with that.
Okay, let's get him up. Get a stool.
Well, it's a pathetic sight in this festival hall in Cannes. The big man who came all this way to be put on his face by a fairly innocent-looking punch. It looked like a jab. In fact, it was a left hook, just hooked, and it was all he needed to pitch full on his face.
That Frank Bruno fight was always going to be my example. I don't call them coincidence because these things crop up too much in my life. Like Chuck Gardner, Bruno's opponent from Minneapolis, and the fight where Curtis Harper walked out was in Minneapolis. It's a sign. That's what I believe. I believe it's a sign. It's a sign of something. And that was Johnny Boss's handiwork. He brought Chuck Gardner from Minneapolis over to Europe. For some reason, all of Frank Bruno's come-up fights were in London. But they decided to hold this fight in France, in Cannes. Why? Maybe they didn't want to expose the Wembley crowd to an opponent like that, because they would have booed their asses off. They would have booed heavily. And maybe that's what it was. Maybe the crowds were getting a bit sick and tired of some of the mismatches that Bruno had. And he had some sickening mismatches. He really did. And you can hear the disgust of Harry Carpenter. Henry Cooper was doing some punditry work with Des Lynam. And Henry went in. Henry tore it up, bruh. Henry tore it up. And then I think people were phoning in. It exposed British boxing pretty bad. It did. People were phoning and complaining. What was that? What was that? That transferred over to the news. They were covering it and asking what's up with bringing opponents like that. What's going on? Is there something wrong with the system? And blah. Yeah. It carried on. The boxing news, they held an inquest. The press were really trying to hold Bruno's foot them to the fire. They really was. His next fight was in Spain. And then he fought for the world title against Tim Witherspoon. The fight in Spain was a tougher opponent, Reggie Groves. He fought Mike Tyson. You know, the guy threw a whole load of punches at Tyson, and Tyson was weaving them and slipping them, and he came back with a left hook and floored him. That guy there. He took Bruno 8. He took Bruno 8 rounds. If any of the points interest you, just let me know what you got to say in the comment section.